Thanks to our friends at The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Rive to receive the top 10 stocks to buy right now. Netflix reports earnings next week, and we're going to get a lot of answers to questions that investors have about the trajectory of this business. This was obviously a pandemic darling. People really pulled forward their subscriptions to a lot of streaming services, including Netflix. But then there's been some rocky roads over the last year or so. So there's a lot to answer here, and I want to get into the 5 questions that I think Netflix needs to answer for investors. My name is Travis William. Thank you for watching Rive Investing. Please subscribe here on YouTube for all my content. The first question is really around churn, and that's the pace at which people are canceling their subscriptions to Netflix or any other subscription service. What you would like to see as an investor or as a company is for churn to be essentially zero. That's not really realistic, but I think in the current environment, Netflix has put itself in a position where churning is relatively easy. And now as there's more streaming options, we could see that churn actually start to increase. So that's something I'm going to be watching closely. So not just the subscriber number and the number of subscribers they added, but how many did they lose in the quarter? Because I think that's going to be very telling about how sticky this in the subscription service is long term. The second question to answer is really around content. Netflix has made a huge move into the content business, acquiring content, acquiring studios, but that hasn't quite played out the way that even management thought that it would. Management said last quarter that content doesn't really translate around the world the way that they thought that it would. They said that it doesn't have the same lasting duration the way that they thought that it would. So when a hit comes out, people watch it, but they watch it very quickly. And then 6 months later, they kind of forget about it. That's just the way things go on Netflix. So the theory, I think, originally was that Netflix would build this huge catalog of content, and then people would keep coming back to it over and over and over again. But they just don't simply do that with Netflix. So what are the adjustments that management's going to make? Are they going to cut back on their own spending? Are they going to be licensing more content from other studios? I think there could be a balance of those two things there, but I'd like to see more detail on exactly what they're going to do. And speaking of competition, are competitors taking market share? We know that some of their streaming competitors like Disney and Disney Plus are doing relatively well, but some are starting to struggle. Peacock, I think, would fall in that category. And I don't think that we're going to have a dozen streaming winners long term. So what does that competitive dynamic look like? And is Netflix starting to see market share losses, or are they gaining market share because some of these streaming competitors are so weak? And what happens to those competitors? Do they just become suppliers to Netflix, which could actually be a boon for the company long term? Or do they end up acquiring each other and building another big service? These are the big strategic questions that Netflix is going to have to answer. And it maybe doesn't have all of the answers itself, but anything that we can hear about what market share, about what's going on with market share and competition, I think is going to be helpful for investors. The fourth question is around advertising. This is something that Netflix said that it was going to introduce as basically a surprise last year. Advertising is always something that Netflix has said that it wasn't going to do, and then it suddenly said that they were going to have an advertising tier. I think ultimately that's going to be a really good thing for the company. They're going to be able to make money off subscriptions and advertising, probably increasing the amount of revenue they're able to generate per user or per account. But how is that ramp going? The more detail we can get about that in their financial statements and comments from management is going to be really helpful. Microsoft is the partner that they're working with there, so they're not building this infrastructure alone. But we know that a lot of competitors like Disney do have a lot more experience in the advertising space than Netflix does. So this is something new for them. So I'd like to see how that ramp is going because this could be potentially a meaningful contributor to the company's bottom line. So really all growth there is going to be good news for investors. And the fifth question is around pricing. I think this is really the question that streaming companies are going to be facing right now is how high can you push pricing before you start to push consumers and users to churn? So that first thing that we talked about, the churn, well, if you push prices to $50, you're going to have people churning at a really rapid rate. But if you keep prices too low, you're not going to be profitable. So there's a balance there that Netflix is going to have to play with around the world. And I would like to know what their ability to raise prices is, especially in this current inflationary environment. If you can keep up with inflation, that's going to be good news. And if you can't, you're ultimately going to lose out because your operating costs and your content costs are going to keep going up, but your revenue isn't going to go up at the same rate, at least at the same rate per user. So we'll see what the average revenue per customer looks like. I think advertising is absolutely going to help that, but I'd like to see how far they can push pricing because that's the one lever that we know that Netflix has to play with. What are you looking for when Netflix releases earnings? It's going to be out next week. This will be something I'm going to be covering on Rive Investing. I'm really interested to see how the streaming battle with Netflix, Disney, and a lot of other companies is playing out. But leave your comments in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you here next time.